or if he says that he smelled marijuana in your car, but we can prove very clearly that there was no marijuana in your car, you don't smoke weed. You didn't just leave from smoking weed. Your clothes didn't smell like weed. You had no reason to search this vehicle other than you wanted to search the vehicle and you needed an excuse, right? And so you said you smelled weed, right?
So let's explain that a little bit. So why can an officer search a vehicle if they say they smell weed?
So that's
Well, welcome to Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement. This is the Know Your Rights workshop. And then immediately after this, we do have a legal pop-up clinic to where the advocacy team with AADM helps people and citizens of the Athens community and surrounding areas whenever they have a discrimination complaint. Whenever they feel that they have been discriminated against by a person or a business or an employer, they can reach out to us, and the advocacy team will help them with their discrimination complaint. And we have, AADM has transitioned from more one-on-one meetings with complainants to now bi-monthly legal pop-up clinics. And my name is Amani Carter, by the way, and I'm currently the advocacy team lead with AADM. However, I'll be transitioning off, and Mocha Johnson, who is one of the founders of AADM, will be taking over this position. And then for the Know Your Rights workshop, I will just pass it on to my colleague here.
Hey, I'm Alicia. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Atlanta. I have my own law firm. I also do public defender work part-time. I do conflict work. I do bail project work. Pretty much anything in the criminal justice, criminal reform world is what I do. I specialize in violent crimes, your armed robberies, aggravated assaults, things like that. But I have worked with a ton of different law firms. I was also a prosecutor for 2 years for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. So criminal defense is kind of my jam, but criminal law is like my thing. Imani and I met in law school, and she's a public defender. She didn't brag about herself, so I will. She's a public defender. She's done tons of trials, tons of experience, very good attorney, very knowledgeable. And so whenever she asked me to do something, I'm like, yes. And so I really wanted this to be kind of a conversation or more relaxed, but we do have some topics we thought we would go through and start with, right? So, everybody watches Law & Order, or used to watch Law & Order. I don't know if it's still
I used to
a thing that people watch or even know about, but they always say you have the right to remain silent, right? Everybody knows that. And I like to remind people of that because it's not an option that you have. It's not like, you can, you have the right? It is something that you are entitled to.
It's in the Constitution.
It's in the Constitution, so you should do it, right? And you shouldn't feel pressured to talk or consent to anything that you don't want to, or feel like because the police asked you a question to search your car, for example, that you need to do that because you don't, right? And I think a lot of people feel like they're going to get in trouble if they say no. And I really want to impress that, because when I see that most of my cases, typically my clients end up in trouble later down the road because they either said something they shouldn't have, or they consented to a search that they shouldn't have and didn't have to, right? Now, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that just because you say no doesn't mean the officer won't still search your car, right? It doesn't mean the officer won't still pat you down for weapons. However, when we're later on in court, right, and I'm dealing with the case, I can say, well, look, judge, my client's rights were violated, whether that's via, a motion to suppress, which is essentially just a motion to exclude evidence from trial, or whatever. I can win on the back end, right? And if I get that evidence suppressed that the officer improperly seized from your car, for example, if the officer pulls you over for a reason that he shouldn't have, right? Or if he says that he smelled marijuana in your car, but we can prove very clearly that there was no marijuana in your car, you don't smoke weed. You didn't just leave from smoking weed. Your clothes didn't smell like weed. You had no reason to search this vehicle other than you wanted to search the vehicle and you needed an excuse, right? And so you said you smelled weed, right?
So let's explain that a little bit. So why can an officer search a vehicle if they say they smell weed?
So that's probable cause in Georgia. That's probable cause to search your vehicle if they smell weed, right? Because weed is illegal, not supposed to have weed in your car, and however we feel about that, it's still in Georgia as a whole. You can't have weed. And so when an officer comes up and they smell that weed, they're like, okay, a crime either has been committed or it's in the process of being committed. There's something illegal going on here. And so I'm gonna search more, right? And probable cause is it shouldn't be a super low standard, but it is. And officers know that, right? And they're aware that almost anything that they do, in my opinion, officers feel like I'm gonna be able to come up with a reason that I can search you, right? I'm gonna be able to say, well, you swerved a little bit over this line, and so, oh, you were driving recklessly. Oh, let me pull you over, you know what I'm saying, and get in and impound your car and search your car and maybe hope I can find some cocaine or something in there, and then I'm gonna charge you with that later on, you know. So that's one of the reasons I think that I see a lot.
Yeah. And so I was also thinking about explaining that an officer has to have a reason to search your person or your vehicle. And just take a step back. So there are different tiers of encounters to where whether or not an officer needs to have a legal reason to search you or invade your privacy, because we have an expectation of privacy in our persons and our properties and our things. That's what the Fourth Amendment is. And we have a right against unlawful searches and seizures. And so, just real briefly, if an officer walks up to you on the street and said, hey, sir or ma'am, let me talk to you for a second. If you don't want to, you can walk away. And unless they have a reason, like the reason why I'm coming up to you is because I just got a 911 call that matches your description, and now I have a reason to investigate, and technically they would have to articulate that reason in order for you to not be able to walk away, to exercise your right to walk away. And then once they have reasonable articulate suspicion to even detain you, whether that's in cuffs or just preventing you from walking away, that's when they have to have some type of probable cause that a crime was being committed or is about to be committed, and that's why they can then invade your privacy by searching you or searching your vehicle. And so that is, and one of the exceptions to warrantless searches, because technically the standard would be to have a warrant before you invade my privacy. And the Fourth Amendment, as I mentioned, protects us from warrantless and unlawful searches and seizures. However, there are exceptions to that, such as I just saw this crime being committed in something like drugs or a car. Those are exigent circumstances to where the person could arguably get rid of the evidence. So instead of going to get a warrant, I need to search them now. Another one is in Georgia, the smell and odor of marijuana, and that they can then search your vehicle. Another big one is plain view, when people have stuff in their consoles like a beer can or something like that. And a lot of our examples are going to be with cars because
that's the biggest one.
That's the biggest one, when you're driving without a headlight and then they come up and then you just had a beer or two and they smell it on you, and then it just goes from a headlight violation to this DUI to a search to a drug sale. So that's where a lot of our examples, it's the easiest, I think, example to give to people of the community, because most of us drive, or we have family members or friends that drive, that these are just things to keep in mind. And so they need to have probable cause to search you, and the smell and odor of marijuana is a big exception to that. So, but Alicia, you talked about consenting to search. Does someone need to consent to search?
Never. No, you do not have to consent to a search of your vehicle, of your person, of anything, right? And I think people know that. I think that we've talked about that. People have seen it on social media, but I think people still get scared. I think when you've never been in trouble before, and there's officers at your car and they have, guns on them, whether the guns are drawn or whatever, you feel kind of a pressure, like, man, I want to say yes. Even though I think we both probably had cases where my client knows that they have drugs in the trunk or underneath it, or they know they have a gun in the center console, but they'll still say yes to a search, and I think that's psychological. I think it's the pressure. And so I want to just impress that upon people. You have the right to say no, and that doesn't mean that the officer's not going to come back with a warrant. Probably they won't. Probably they won't. But that doesn't mean they're not going to continue to try to pressure you or try to go back and get a warrant to search your car. I think what a lot of officers and what they're teaching and training now is to try to, you might say no, right? Or you might say something, you might not say no, you might say, I want to think about it, right? And the officer, when they hear that, if they see you going down this path of saying no, they might try to talk to you some more, try to get you, try to make you feel comfortable.
Well,
try to
make this process easier.
Yeah, well, it'll just make it faster. You know what I'm saying? You're not in trouble, man. I don't want to arrest you. Just let me, look around. You look like an upstanding dude. There's probably nothing in your car anyway, right? Trying to convince you to say yes. It's the same thing about how you don't have to talk to an officer, without your attorney. It's the same thing.
A big one.
So when they have you in an interrogation room and you're like, I don't know, I'm nervous, like, maybe I should call my mom, but that's not saying that you don't want to talk to an attorney. So that's a whole nother topic. But when you are in an investigation, for example, and you have the right to speak to an attorney, you have to articulate that clearly, right? You don't have, I believe that's what the law is saying, right?
Yep.
No, I don't want to talk to you, I want to talk to an attorney. Anything less than that,
like whatever will do, make it quicker, or I guess, or silence sometimes.
I don't know. Do I have a lawyer?
Yeah.
Like, don't I have that right? They're gonna say, you know what, man. They're not gonna be like, yeah, you definitely have the right to an attorney. You don't have to talk to me. It's gonna be like, I don't know, man. I'm just trying to help out. Man, I had a long day too. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of things. They're gonna try to level with you, right? Like you're best friends, and you're not friends. At the end of the day, they are there to do their job, which is to get to the bottom of this crime, whatever they think was committed, and get you to confess.
Right. And they're trained to do that.
They're trained to do that. They're trained to like pretend like you're homeboys. You're not homeboys. When you're in that room, that interrogation room, you're there for a reason, or they think you're there for a reason. They're trying to get you to confess to something or get you to go down for something. So that's really important.
Yeah.
The point of that was, no, I want to speak to my lawyer. You have to say that expressly and clearly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about anything right now, or anything we've said, or any topics on your mind right now? No? Okay. Do you want to talk about a hypothetical or a case that you've seen, quote unquote, the case just turned for the worse? As in either the officer didn't have a legal reason to stop your client, but yet your client gave them a reason, or the client was, not really doing anything wrong, and then they consented to a search, and then that just opened up a whole can of worms. Do you have any examples of that?
I'm trying to think back. I have tons of cases where people talk and they shouldn't have.
Right.
That's like the crux of every case. It's a little bit difficult to think of a case where the officer pulled a client over and they shouldn't have, because the officers always come up with a reason.
Right.
Thereafter, in my opinion, right?
Well, let's back up. Do the officers in your counties where you work, do they regularly wear body cameras?
Yeah, in Fulton County they do. In Clayton County they don't. I don't know what's up with Clayton County, but they act like they're allergic to body cameras.
In Athens they do, and so in hindsight, you can watch your attorney can watch the video and see, if the officer wrote in his report they crossed over the yellow line and that's failure to maintain lane, but yet you watch the video and that's not accurate. We have seen cases like that where the case gets thrown out, even though there's drugs found in the car, even though this person is probably drunk off their butt, because the officer's report wasn't credible, or there was no legal reason to pull them over. Anything after that is what's called suppress. I think Alicia mentioned that earlier, motion to suppress, and that's where your attorney, while the case is pending, is looking for those issues. It's not necessarily the fact that drugs were found on you doesn't mean like you're guilty at all. Like, it doesn't mean that the case is over, because that's what attorneys and process, and that's what the whole process is about. And so body cameras really, really help. And I hate you said Clayton County though, it doesn't? That is crazy.
Yeah, I haven't seen And a lot of counties will say budget cuts for whatever reason. We can't afford body cameras, but it's hard because again, all you have is this officer's police report. And of course, by the time they write the report, it's tight for the most part, right? They've gotten their story together. They know, they might have talked to a prosecutor. This is something people don't know. When I was a prosecutor, when I started out, I was kind of in like, I don't know, the trenches, right? I was like at the bottom of the barrel. And I'm in intake. And so officers are calling me on the street constantly. A part of your job is to advise officers as to whether this is lawful or not. So they're calling me, hey, I just found this guy. I found a book bag. I think it's this dude's book bag and there's a gun inside, but I don't know. What can I do? Can I arrest him? Can I get a warrant to search him? What can I do, right? And so we're talking them through it and I'm saying no, yes, no, yes. But by the time, because they've talked to a prosecutor, right? Because they've kind of done these trainings, they know how to craft these police reports so that it sounds like everything was copacetic and everything was within the law. So it's hard when you don't have the body cam to go back and second guess and confirm what they're doing. So that's another thing. And even before trial, I know a lot of my clients, we're in trial or we're in a motions hearing and they're like, the officer's lying. I'm like, I know, it's okay. We're gonna get them. But you gotta understand that by the time they get to the stand, they've been prepped by the prosecutor. Any good prosecutor is prepping that police officer, talking to them, hey, this is what the law says. You need to answer in this way, right? In order for us to not get this evidence thrown out. So that's so you're dealing with that. So if you go into the case and you know that this officer's been prepped by this prosecutor, but you have that body cam footage or you have the inconsistencies between the police report and the body cam, I think, you can still you can maneuver, if that makes sense. But it's like what Amani said, I don't care what you had on you. I don't care if you had the drugs on you. I don't care if you had the cocaine in the car. I don't really care if you had a gun and you weren't supposed to have it at that time. There are still legal avenues by which we can work on your case. And if the initial search wasn't in accordance with the law, if something happened afterwards or you were harassed, if anything that happened that wasn't supposed to happen, then yeah, you can get the whole case dismissed based on what they call a technicality. Right. That's what they call it. I don't call it a technical. I'm like, this is what the law says.
And it's your right, too. It's like, the Constitution says that. Exactly. So you have a right to be free from those searches. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to a lawyer. So, were you able to think of a case?
I have cases where the clients, I had a case like that where the officer pulled the clients over for, I think it was a seatbelt violation.
Oh, wow.
And they arrested them, they searched the car, and they find some drugs or something. But come to find out that they shouldn't have arrested or pulled them over for the seatbelt violation. They certainly shouldn't have arrested them for the seatbelt violation. So that was really the big thing in the case. Well, you weren't even supposed to arrest this person for the seatbelt violation.
Why not?
The defense attorneys, this is when I was a prosecutor, were saying that you can't arrest somebody for a seatbelt violation. I didn't know that at the time. So I'm a prosecutor learning the law, right, from defense attorneys, but you can't arrest somebody for the seatbelt violation. Officers might not know that. And so when they did that and they searched the car, everything got thrown out because you never should have arrested this person. So that's why you have to have a really strong command as your attorney of the law, what the facts are, because you can't assume that everything the officer did was just by the book. Right. So that's a little tiny one.
And also, though, that brings up a lot of things that we see, not so much, and I work in Athens, and so a lot of my experience is only in Athens. I know Atlanta is probably just a different ball game, but seatbelt violation, a search is not only supposed to have a reason for it, but when you're searching someone's property or the car, is supposed to be in search of items in furtherance of the crime. So that's usually when you get pulled over and they smell marijuana. Obviously, to find the marijuana, I need to search the car because that's in furtherance of the crime of possession of marijuana. When you get pulled over and they smell alcohol in your breath or see a beer can in the console or your eyes are red and your speech is slurred, they're gonna then investigate you further with, standardized field sobriety tests, and then want to search the vehicle for items in furtherance of the crime. However, a seatbelt violation, the crime is over. There's no such thing as evidence in furtherance of a seatbelt violation. So that was alarming when you said they, not only did they unlawfully arrest that person, because you can't under the statute,
And they searched the car.
and then they searched it, that was also unlawful in and of itself. And even if, like, for example, suspended license, you're allowed to arrest on suspended license, but I don't think that pulling someone over and they say my license is suspended, that car should not be searched. But then there's also the exception of somewhat the retroactive of the impound search.
Yep.
Because your license was suspended.
Yeah.
I'm arresting this driver for a suspended license.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even call for a family member to come pick it up. So they just jump to, well, I have to impound it because this driver can't drive it off. And that means when they do an impound, they have to do a inventory. And so they get around that with an inventory search. And it's just like, even though there's no evidence of in furtherance of a crime to suspend a license in the vehicle, they end up finding other stuff in there most of the time. And that's because it was during an inventory search. And I will say the law in Georgia is not the best on that. You can even, it's just like, that's essentially it's not fair.
It's not fair.
But
I had a case just like that when I was a prosecutor, where there was, the officers searched the car, but they shouldn't have. At first we thought they didn't get a search warrant. They did have a search warrant, but the prosecutors didn't turn that over to the defense attorney.
Wow.
And so it was suppressed. It should have been turned over. It wasn't. That's important evidence in the case. So that gets suppressed.